name is Jenny, and I'm a wife and mom raising 2 kids. But I used to live a more glamorous life as a TV reporter. I was on the nightly news interviewing pop stars and politicians. So when I said goodbye to TV and hello to motherhood, I suddenly discovered what we moms are up against. We live in a world that tells us to be rich and famous, thin and successful. You know, almost nobody says, "Oh, hey, you're a mom? That's fabulous." But you are fabulous, and I'm here to tell you why.
It's the ChannelMom Show, celebrating you with Jenny Dean Schmidt.
So here we have somebody to tell us some very alarming things about the effect of technology on our children. Emily Listfield, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is a former magazine editor-in-chief and author of 5 novels, including It Was Gonna Be Like Paris and Waiting to Surface. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Harper's Bazaar, Redbook, Self, Ladies' Home Journal, New York Magazine, and Parade. She lives in New York City with her daughter, who I actually chatted with yesterday. Welcome, Emily. Did I get anything wrong in that intro?
No, and I'm a contributing editor at Parade, and this was a story in Parade magazine.
Yes, it was. And just so people remember, here in Denver, we get it in the Denver Post every Sunday. And so you've probably seen that magazine, and Emily writes for it. So I felt like this was a really important article when I read it. It was called Generation Wired. And it's all about, you know, our kids and the internet. In fact, Emily has this great line that Facebook, that would make me really sound dated. Facebook is a high school cafeteria on steroids. And I love it because that's really what it is. How'd you come up with that?
Well, first of all, I have a teenager, so yeah. I'm well aware of high school cafeterias. But it really is. Facebook is not all bad. There's a lot of good in it.
Sure.
It can help kids connect with each other. It can help them connect to causes they care about. It can keep them involved. But it can also exacerbate existing problems. Kids assume that other kids are telling the truth when they're posting about all the fun they're having. Well, that can make certain kids feel left out. It can make them feel rejected. Mm-hmm. And it may not even be true what other kids are posting.
Right.
So kids have to be made aware of that.
Absolutely. You know, you're right. I want to say right off the bat that the internet is not all bad. I'm not somebody that's saying that every parent should just throw their computers out the window. We are very strict in our house about the computer. In fact, my son is 13 and does not have a Facebook page, and he does not have a phone that he can text on. He has a phone just for emergencies, but he's not allowed to text on it. So we are super strict, but that doesn't mean that I expect everybody to be exactly like us. I will say, though, that most parents seem not to think that the stuff that's going on with their kids with texting and the internet is all good, because in your article, you say that 67% of parents actually say texting is hurting their kids' school performance, and yet kids are still texting. What about that?
Well, I think the point that's very new for parents is the fact that they really have to be involved in their kids' digital lives, just as they've always been involved in their sports lives and extracurriculars and school lives. Mm-hmm. And I think there's been a tendency, because parents don't really know the rules of the road, to just kind of wander a bit in terms of rules. But I think every family has to come up with expectations that work for them. There are no set rules. There are recommendations.
Right.
But then really stick to them.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, kids, I was alarmed by some of the statistics you shared. Kids 11 to 14 spend 73 minutes a day texting, and older teens more like 2 hours a day texting. And the researchers who looked at the brain and looked at the behavior that's resulting in some of this stuff, there are 2 things I want you to touch on. One is that they're concerned that kids are losing the value of face-to-face speaking. They can text sorry, but they don't have to look somebody in the eye and say, "I'm sorry," and experience true, you know, kind of repentance or remorse, nor do they feel full forgiveness because somebody's writing back and saying, no problem, or whatever, and it's to text. So they're losing the advantage of that. In addition to that, there's this addiction issue, not only for the kind of the cyberspace thing, but also for video games, that the dopamine cells in your body, they literally have traced that, are triggered by the stuff that's going on in front of you in cyberspace and via texting and all that. So can you talk about both of those issues, the face-to-face communication that we're losing and the addiction?
Absolutely. I think what people who have been studying for years now, the texting phenomenon with teens, which is really a change in rudimentary behavior. When we were kids, teenagers, we might talk on the phone for hours. Teenagers hardly pick up their phone anymore. I know that I often have to text my daughter and say, "Please call me." Mm-hmm. And one of the things that concerns child psychologists and behavioralists about this is that kids are losing the abilities to talk face-to-face, to read vocal intonations, to read visual cues. And they worry about how this will affect them later in life, for instance, when they have to negotiate for a job. They don't have as much experience in face-to-face contact in social negotiations that are important to life. Those are important skill sets.
Yeah.
And one of the things parents need to do is insist that there are times when their kids actually have to talk on the phone to them or to others and not just text.
Oh.
I think that's very important. And you might also consider setting up no texting zones in your house. For instance, the kitchen or the dining room are communal areas where people are meant to talk to each other. You can't text while you're there.
Yeah.
And one of the researchers I spoke to had another good suggestion, which was taking your kids to school, whether you're driving or walking, whatever, used to be kind of a prime time for parents to talk to their kids. Now kids get in the car and text, or parents get in the phone, and frankly, you have to model this behavior, not get on the phone when you get in a car, and use that time to really talk to your kids.
Yeah.
As far as the dopamine, it's very interesting. And this isn't just for kids. I mean, I'm sure all your listeners and you have experienced when you get an unexpected email from someone you haven't heard from for a long time, or someone you're hoping to hear from. You get a little flutter. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's a physiological effect. There's dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter in your brain, which sort of triggers pleasure. Dopamine goes off for adults and for kids when they get a text or an email. So in some ways, it can be an addictive behavior. And dopamine also is triggered by video games.
Yeah.
So it's kind of video games. The researchers compare it to gambling. It's something called intermittent reinforcement. You win a little, and so you want to keep playing more because you don't know when you'll win again.
Right. And my husband has done some research because he's a high school principal in his school, actually went through a school shooting. And so he's done some research on violent video games. And there's a link to violent video game playing and kids who end up doing school shootings. They found a pretty strong link between those two things. And then they have found that those kids, when they do that, unlike adults, the dopamine thing goes off, but then they don't have the filter that adults have. And they get that desensitized thing to violence and flashing lights and screams and death. They get desensitized. It's been proven.
Well, they get desensitized, and also the prefrontal cortex is matured in adults is not matured in kids, and that's the part that has reasoning.
Yeah, right.
So that they don't understand cause and effect as clearly as we do.
Right. You know, I think Shelley's going to have a question for you too. Shell, do you have a question for Emily about all this stuff that we're talking about via technology?
I'm kind of skeptical, to be honest, because I'm not witnessing it in my own children, and so my curiosity is it happening, and I'm just kind of clueless.
How old are your kids?
They are, well, the older ones are 15 and 13. The younger one doesn't text and doesn't play video. And the other one's video games are limited to sports.
So what aren't you witnessing?
I'm not seeing a sense of not being able to talk on the phone or not being able to read intonations or body language. I'm not seeing that in my own children.
But are they texting all the time, or are they unlike the typical? Are they not on it 73 minutes to 2 hours a day?
Again, I got to admit, I'm clueless.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do I really care that they're not into what?
Is a big issue as well. I have to say, my daughter never played video games, but she texts like a maniac.
Okay.
And I never had problems with her being on the computer too long, but I do think that she and her friends text instead of talking.
And so for moms listening who have toddlers, because we have moms who have real young kids too, what do you think the overwhelming thing you discovered was when you talked to these researchers, you talked to these psychologists? What do you think the overwhelming thing was in terms of their concern and in terms of what they thought was a benefit of the internet
well, there's a
participation?
huge benefit. And what everyone was saying is we need to set limits, but don't be scared of technology. Technology, first of all, is here to stay.
Yeah.
So we have to deal with it. But it has many positives. So we shouldn't be scared of it. It can be a great learning tool. It can be a great way, under certain conditions, for children and families to interact. Mm-hmm. You can stay closer to kids than you used to be able to. There are many, many good things, but there have to be limits. For instance, with video games, it's not just violent games that parents should be aware of, but even the most benign offerings, kids can stay on them too long. For every hour they're playing video games, they're not exercising, they're not doing homework, they're not reading. It might have something to to do with the obesity epidemic in this country.
Right.
So most experts say limit it to 1 hour a day. That's not saying never allow video games, but they're saying monitor the content. Go with your kids to the video store to pick the game store to pick out games instead of letting them pick out their own, and set time limits. So we should not be scared at all of technology. I happen to love the computer. I love the internet. We just have to get involved in our kids' digital lives.
Absolutely. I mean, we're picky about our kids' friends, right? I mean, they bring somebody home that we're not feeling too great about, and we get involved in that. And really, they're choosing to hang out with another influence, which is called a video game or whatever, Facebook or whatever. They're hanging out with something that we should take just as much of an interest in as we do their friends, correct?
That's absolutely true. And another thing is, when it used to be if your child comes home, seems sort of lethargic at the end of the day, or seems like something's bothering them, you might ask if they had a stomach ache or something like that, or something happened in school. It pays now to say, did something happen online that was upsetting today?
Really?
And open that dialogue, because it does. I think cyberbullying might be overplayed in the press to some degree, but it is very real. Mm-hmm. And kids, again, it's a face-to-face thing. Kids who might never insult another kid face-to-face might do it online.
That's
they
right.
Don't quite get that what they say, that you should never write something in an email or a text that you wouldn't say face-to-face.
Sure. I want to throw out just one or two more things. We only have about a minute left, Emily, but they say about 8.5% of kids have some kind of a potential addiction in cyberspace. So I just want people to know that. So to be aware of it with your kids. Also, attention issues. They find that maybe kids that are constantly doing this stuff are having problems with attention, whether in school or paying attention to you or to any given thing. And so I just want people to be aware of that. And this was all very well highlighted in your article. And I thank you, by the way, for writing it. So well,
thank you. And it's available on parade.com if your listeners want to check it out.
Parade.com, and it's called Generation Wired, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's just something that we need to be aware of. And you're right. It is not all bad. It certainly isn't. I just want, Emily, and I think you do too with a teenage daughter yourself, I want our kids to be able to grow up and be prepared for parenting themselves face to face and not texting their baby, right. And marriage and whatever other relations that they have that are not just skin deep, that are not just, OMG and BTW. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? And gosh, one of the best things about being on the planet is interaction with other human beings, and I don't want our kids to lose that.
I don't think they will. I think it will be different. But again, I think we have to set limits.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got some great suggestions in that article. So tell people the several ways they can get a hold of you or to go look at that article. One is parade.com. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the best way. If you go on parade.com and either in the search put Generation Wired or put my name, Emily Listfield, it will come up. And Emily, you also have a website if people are interested in your books and so on. Tell people about that. Yes, it's EmilyListfield.com. Wonderful. Well, it was great to have you on, and please, contact us next time you write a very child and parent relevant article, because we'd love to have you on again. Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it. Okay, thanks. Take care, Emily. Bye-bye. Bye. Coming up. I don't know about you, Mom, but right after Thanksgiving, I can get truly overwhelmed about all the demands of December. My birthday happens to be in December, right on the same day as my mother's. The gifts, the functions, the parties, the decorations, the food, the money flying out of your checkbook, and the demands and expectations of family, including the demands and expectations of our children, who expect all kinds of things in December. I find that I need an attitude adjustment before December even begins. And I have the attitude adjuster just for you. She's like a chiropractor for your attitude. And I can almost guarantee you that she is going to help you with your attitude today. Carol Ladd, I just love her. And just stay tuned for her, because she's going to pick up your spirits and get you through this Christmas season.